In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Look what Juan got me. This is the visual part. Woo!
Okay, Taylor's showing me a sign that says on air. It's like an old-timey. It takes me back to watching Frasier. I used to like to watch Frasier.
Does it look backwards to you?
No.
Can you screenshot it? It's backwards to me.
It says on air. There we go. We
Thank
got
you.
it.
All right, it's very exciting. So now my light's on, and I'm ready.
Good. The light that only you can see.
The light that only I can see.
So yeah, we'll go ahead and kick things off. Hi everyone, welcome to Doomed to Fail. I'm Farz, joined here by Taylor. Hi Taylor, how are you?
Good. Like trying to figure out where to put my on-air sign.
I feel like it needs to be
not a problem. I'm gonna put it on my door, I think.
It needs to go outside. It needs to be like something that you can like trigger. Taylor just got a lovely on-air sign, one of those old-timey ones that radio people used to have, and it looks great. It looks very professional.
Just like us. Like a ring light.
Just like us, we're super professional.
Super profesh, as always.
So, per usual, we're going to be doing two stories, one historical, one true crime around relationships that were doomed to fail. And I think I go first this time.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So why don't we start by you telling us what your drink is, Taylor? I will then segue into my drink and story.
Great. Today I'm drinking holy water, straight from Jesus's breast.
Loving nipple.
I don't know where blessed water.
Is holy water just any water that a pastor?
Yeah, I remember I
spits
used to there was a Catholic church that my mom had us go to a couple times when I was like a teen, and there was like a water fountain, and it was like this water fountain has been blessed, or like the pipe had been blessed, so like went into the little fountain that had the thing, so that like covered it, so you didn't have to bless like all the droplets of water individually, and like the bird bath that you put the baby in.
It feels cheap to do it that way.
That's all.
I want every vessel to be blessed as the water goes into it.
Me too, absolutely.
I'm a perfectionist, though. You know that about me. So yours is holy water, which I don't think you're supposed to drink, but what do I know?
It can't hurt.
Probably can't hurt.
It's good to be hydrated. Yeah.
Yeah. It's Jesus water hydrates better than regular water. It's like Gatorade. It's got electrolytes. My drink today is prickly pear, because we are going to be covering a rather prickly individual in today's true crime story, and it takes place in Texas, which is not the home of prickly pear. I feel like that's more of like a New Mexico or Arizona thing, but you can definitely get some good prickly pear juice in Texas as well.
So just like the juice of a prickly pear? Not like a prickly pear margarita? Just the juice of a prickly pear?
You know what's funny is when I was researching this, I actually looked up prickly pear recipes and I found the margarita one and it looked so good. And I was like, write it down. And I got into researching the story and I forgot to write down the recipe for the prickly pear.
There's someone here in Joshua Tree that like I follow on Instagram who has a prickly pear and like a store or something, and they made a prickly pear margarita and it looked really fun.
It looks delicious. It looks incredible. Yeah. It's a lovely color. It's fuchsia. So just so everybody knows, because y'all might not know, prickly pear, it's a cactus, but it's a cactus that has that little flower at the very top that's like a very, very bright fuchsia color. And that's the thing that you can open up and drink, which like if you're ever in the desert, you can open a prickly pear and drink that and you'll be fine. Well, you'll still probably die, but that's mostly from the animals that are going to maul your bones.
Yeah.
So, okay, my story. Thank you. My story today is about the relationship between a man named Bernie Tiede and Marjorie Nugent. Have you heard these names before?
I don't think so.
Okay. You'll probably remember as I go into this, because this is actually a pretty famous case.
Okay.
Bernie was actually famously played by actor Jack Black in the 2011 film by Richard Linklater titled Bernie. Does that ring a bell?
No.
Damn. Okay. I will say this: if you haven't seen it, you should. It is an amazing movie. It is so fun. It's funny. It's dark. It's witty. It's clever. It's like the ambiance of it is just fantastic. Jack Black plays a fantastic character, and Shirley MacLaine is kind of like his other lead in the movie, and she's obviously amazing in everything she does as well. But the movie itself and the story that I'm going to go into both kind of hit the tone of what we essentially classify as dark humor, because it is about murder, but it is fun. It's a fun murder. So
It does say, and this I feel like is ties to us. It says the book is based on. It's called Midnight in the Garden of East Texas.
yes, yeah,
That's
I'm
fun.
gonna. So it's not a book; it's an article.
Got it.
And I'm gonna reference that article a lot because that was the origination point. So Richard Linklater, are you familiar with him, the director?
I'm gonna say yes.
And
Yes.
then
Dazed and
ask.
Confused.
Okay, it was funny because the way you phrased it, I was like, I'll say yes as long as you don't ask any follow-up questions.
I'm looking it up
So,
now. I can answer now that it is that I'm on um Wikipedia. But
yeah,
yes.
no, he's great. His movies are fantastic. He's an Austin native. This story takes place in East Texas, which isn't terribly far from Austin, and so it got a lot of press coverage in Texas Monthly when it was published, and that was the basis. That article was the basis for everything we're going to discuss here, including the movie.
Cool.
So let's get into it. So I'm going to get into the story here in a minute, but first, I just want to set the tone of how people in the city where this took place felt about the individuals that we're going to be discussing. Again, the names are Marjorie Nugent, she goes by Marge, and Bernie Tiede goes by Bernie. So
Who
here's
plays
some
Marge in the movie? Is that Shirley MacLaine?
Shirley MacLaine, yeah.
Okay.
So here are direct quotes from that article you just referenced.
Okay.
One of them says, quote, "If I made a list of people I knew were going to heaven, Bernie would be the first on that list," end quote.
I love it.
Referencing Marge, quote, "If she had held her nose any higher, she would have drowned in a rainstorm," end quote. This is from a city councilman named Olin Joffrion, who said, quote, "From the day that deep freeze was opened, you haven't been able to find anyone in town saying poor Mrs. Nugent. People here are saying poor Bernie," end quote. Spoiler alert, Marge ends up in a deep freeze.
Oh
So
my God,
that's
that's so
where this
funny.
quote comes from. So let's get into the story itself. So like I said, so this is a Texas town. It's called Carthage. It's in East Texas. It's very, very close to the Louisiana border. It's a very small town. It's completely flat. You can look up Google images of it. It is just like this small Texas town. It's what it reminds me of the town in Napoleon Dynamite. It
Oh
reminds
yeah.
me of all the little cities that that Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men visited.
Yeah.
It has that kind of a feel to it.
I see. Yeah.
So,
Small
you know,
Texas town.
it's a very little small Texas town. Like the people there are just exactly what you would expect. It's predominantly white. It's lower middle class, and that's generally like the personality types. These people just go to church. They go to church. They go to local diner. They just live simple lives. I'll put it that way.
Hmm.
What's interesting is for some reason that I couldn't totally hone in on, Carthage was just full of these like rich one-off individuals where these people made money in oil in Texas and then would relocate to Carthage to die, basically. For some
Hmm.
reason, there's a bunch of those there. That also segues into Marge and her story as well. But getting into Bernie, Bernie himself was a funeral director in Carthage. So he's a
Hmm.
mortician. I actually hadn't thought about this before I started researching this story, but if you're in a small town and you're a funeral director, it's kind of like a powerful position to have. So it feels kind of like almost like a sheriff or a pastor because at some point, nearly every person in that town is going to have to interface with you in some way, and
Right.
you're going to have to solve a very, very complicated, emotionally charged situation for them. And
Hmm.
so you kind of like get this kind of Midas touch of everybody in town needing to know you and liking you in large part. And Bernie was exactly that. He was beloved in Carthage, like absolutely beloved. He was a happy guy. Take a look at his pictures. He just seems like somebody who's just constantly smiling. Like he does not have bad days. Rain does not fall on him when he walks around. That's how I see his pictures. Have you seen
Wait,
his? Are
who's
you
that?
looking?
I'm trying to find him in real life. What's his last name in real life?
Tiede, Tiede.
Got it.
This is a silent portion of the audio medium that we're using.
I see. Oh, I mean, great casting. Great job, everyone.
Right?
Yeah.
He's super, yeah, he's just a super likable guy. He was a community guy. He always was. He was super involved in his church. He was on Enquire, Inquire, however you'd phrase that. And he also had a habit of going like above and beyond for his clients. So he had a habit of after the services for weeks and weeks and weeks onward, checking in on his clients who were usually old widows or widowers and just making sure they're doing okay, bringing them food and things like that. He was just such a nice guy. Like I'm trying to think, I feel like I knew someone like this in high school, and a part of me was always like, what are you hiding? Why are you trying to be this nice? Like, there's nothing. There's got to be something behind those
Uh-oh.
gestures.
Yeah.
So the article that I referenced for the story, there's two of them. One of them you already referenced. There's another article I referenced as well. That one is called "The Bizarre Story of Bernie Tiede and the Real Murder Case That Inspired the Movie Bernie" by Neil Patmore. Not a very creative title. You could have probably cut that in half, but it is what it is. And in that article, it was said that he was widely regarded as the nicest man in town. Bernie was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's one side of this equation. This angelic human who just loves to serve his community and everybody loves to be around.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side, you have his former client, Marjorie/Marge Nugent, who met Bernie as he took care of her late husband's funeral arrangements.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said earlier, Marge's late husband was one of these uber rich dudes in the oil industry who made a ton of money. Marge was actually originally from Carthage. And so whenever they got into their twilight years, he decided, hey, let's go back to Carthage and settle down there. They bought a huge house, like way too big for two elderly people who can barely walk 10 feet without falling down. It is estimated that his net worth that he bequeathed to Marge was somewhere in the range of $10 million, give or take.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, they bought a bank, Taylor. Like that's the kind of money they owned the only bank in town. That's the kind of money these people had. Yeah.
That's money and that's power.
Exactly. Influence, power, all of it. So contrasting her reputation to Bernie's, her reputation was the meanest woman in Carthage.
Oh.
So Bernie manages Marge's husband's funeral and per usual starts following up with Marge. This is part of his routine, just making sure that she's okay, what's going on. And in doing so, he noticed that she has nobody. Like, he'd go to the house and there was just nobody. It's just this woman sitting alone in this giant house with
They didn't have any
nothing
kids
going
or
on.
anything.
Had a kid, totally estranged. Literally, nobody liked her. Nobody wanted to be around her. Yeah, that was her general vibe. So she was basically sat alone in this house, and Bernie, who by all accounts is this incredibly empathetic human being, just felt so bad for her. And so he made a point to go out of his way to spend time with her. He'd go over there, he'd hang out, they'd go out to dinner together, and they started becoming kind of a thing. So they'd even go so far as to take like these international trips. At this time, Bernie would have been 39 and she would have been 81 years old.
So he wasn't in a relationship.
No, by most accounts, people assumed he's gay.
Got it.
People in Carthage assumed he's gay, and I'm actually gonna go to a quote that was like great. It's the most Texas quote calling someone gay you'll possibly ever hear. But they would start going on these trips together, so they were becoming kind of like a thing. And the article you quoted earlier is what I'm going to quote here. So that is called "Midnight in the Garden of East Texas." That's by a man named Skip Hollingsworth, who did all this research. He did a fantastic job. He like basically lived in Carthage to like get this story out. He would talk to people, the town folks, everything. And in one of the diners he was at, when people brought up Bernie and the idea of him dating a woman, somebody said, this is a quote, "You can tell he's never been deer hunting in his life." End quote. Like that's the way that
I get it.
He said that they all thought he was gay, but nobody cared. I mean, everybody makes Texas out to be this like prejudiced place. It's like nobody gives a shit. Texas is beautiful because nobody cares what you do. You just do your own thing and nobody bothers you. And nobody cared that they thought he was gay. They were like, he's gay. It is what it is. He's a nice guy. It doesn't matter. So at some point during this friendship, relationship, whatever you want to call it, Bernie, to his credit, never said they dated, but everybody was like, it's weird. They sleep in the same room and are always together. So who knows what's happening. Yeah. Bernie quit his job to basically just manage Marge's business account. become a business manager basically, because she had all these different interests, right? Like she had these stock portfolios, and she owned a bank, and there was all this bills had to be paid, stuff had to be taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
She eventually made Bernie the sole beneficiary to her will, and instructed Bernie that upon her death, her family was not to get a dime of her inheritance. And the way wills are done, you can't manipulate someone into doing this. There's got to be attestation. There's got to be witnesses. There's questions
Yeah.
around your competency, the duress. Like Bernie didn't force her to do this. She just did it
Right.
on her own whim because this is the only person she had in her life. This relationship with Bernie and Marge, just like every other relationship Marge seems to have with another human, turned abusive. Bernie would later state that, quote, she was just so controlling, she felt like she could own me, and I guess to some degree she did, end quote. You see this in the movie. There's a great scene in the movie where there's like an armadillo or a possum in the backyard, and she's like, kill it, it's gonna come in the house, and she gives a gun to Bernie, and Bernie just can't bring himself to hurt it, and she's just like bantering him and saying what a wuss he is. Like, that's probably the exact vibe that this woman had with
Yeah,
him.
she sounds awful. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so 3 years after this arrangement started, Bernie would eventually shoot and kill Marge at her home in the driveway, shooting her in the back with a gun, like one of her guns, a 22. And he would take her body and wrap it up in sheets, put it at the bottom of a deep freeze, a freezer, and then put food on top of it to make it seem like there's something going on. When this event took place, Bernie had full control of Marge's finances. So he had power of attorney. Not
Mm-hmm.
only did he get the inheritance, I mean, he wouldn't get the inheritance now anyways, because at this point, nobody knows she's dead, so there's no will to be executed on. But he had full power of attorney, so he could write checks anyways. He could withdraw money, he could do whatever he wanted with her bank account.
Mm-hmm.
So with the knowledge that she's dead and that he now has access to these millions and millions of dollars, Bernie starts basically just being a philanthropist. It is estimated that he distributed somewhere around $2 million of Marge's money through various different philanthropic endeavors. He would pay people's college tuitions. He would offer scholarships to people. He would buy people cars who needed vehicles. He would donate to the church, and like he
I
was
love that.
just all. There was one story that I forgot what it was. Something. It was something about. I remember there was a trophy store in town. So this store just made trophies, and
Yeah.
one year it was gonna shut down because there was not that much business, obviously, and the girls team or something had just won some basketball or softball thing, and
Mm-hmm.
he was like, he paid the store to stay open for the next like year so that they would have the time to make trophies for this team, because he thought that it was bad that the team won and they didn't get a trophy. Like, he was just a
That's
sweet
awesome.
guy, right? Like, he was just such a sweet, thoughtful guy.
There was definitely a trophy store in my town growing up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't recall having one, but I never won a trophy, so it didn't matter.
Mm.
So all the while this is going on, he's telling people that Marge was either sick or that she was out of town on a trip or doing something for 9 months. And for the most part, nobody cared.
Yeah, it
Because
sounds like no one cared.
yeah, because on the one hand, Bernie's awesome. He was awesome anyways. Now he's awesome because he's awesome at just giving everybody money. Second, Marge sucks. So who cares if she's not around? Nobody cared. So everybody wins, basically. So it is worth noting that amidst all this stuff that's going on, there's also like weird litigation happening amongst Marge and her family, because the husband divested everybody but Marge of his inheritance. Marge is making claims and has in fact divested everybody of the rest of that inheritance. And so all these people are jockeying to understand. It's kind of like when Ann Nicole Smith's husband died, and then the entire family just poured in and started suing everybody, saying like, who's going to get the money, who should get what. That's basically
Of
what
course.
happened here.
Yeah.
So despite the fact that nobody actually gave a shit about Marge's well-being or what's going on with her, they cared to the extent that she was part of litigation that had to be addressed as it related to the money in the will. So her death had obvious financial impacts, and so they needed to stay on top of her, not because
Uh-huh.
they gave a shit about her well-being, but because they needed to know what to do next with the litigation. So
Yeah, yeah.
her estranged son, Rod Nugent, he lived in Amarillo. Apparently, he was successful. He's a pathologist, a doctor. He has a family there doing his own thing, and he obviously, given that he's in Amarillo and he's totally estranged from his mom, has no insight in what Bernie's doing in Carthage.
Right.
So at the 9-month mark, nobody, no lawyers, no family, nobody's heard of Marge, and Rod decides to go to Carthage to be like, what's going on? Let's go to the house and figure out what's going on. So he goes with his daughter to Carthage. They let themselves in. They walk around the house. No sign of life. Nothing going on. It's worth noting Bernie had his own house, so he wasn't there.
Right. I was going to ask, did he live there? He didn't. Okay.
He didn't. Marge bought him a house, like gave him a 0-interest loan to buy the house, but then she died, so he just bought the house.
Yeah.
Eventually, they would uncover her body in the freezer. And obviously, Rod reported this to the police. The police immediately showed up, and the first person they questioned was Bernie. Though it's for
Yeah,
sure
of
Bernie
course.
that did this.
Yeah.
So he immediately admitted to killing. I mean, you look at this guy, and like he's not like a savage. He's not a guy who's gonna like have to get worked over with a good cop bad cop routine. He's a soft guy, right?
Totally.
So he immediately confesses to killing her. I'm going to go into my usual legal procedure mode here for a minute. There's
Hmm.
a pre-trial concept known as change of venue, which just means moving a trial away from where the events that are subject to that trial took place to ensure a fair trial.
Yeah. Like if everyone
Usually,
knows you can't.
right.
Yeah.
But no, so this is interesting. This is different. This is different than what you're perceiving there. Usually the reason to do this is because the defendant could not be afforded a fair trial in that area because it's presumed that everybody would hate them. So, for example,
Hmm.
Timothy McVeigh wasn't tried in Oklahoma City. Like, none of these guys get tried in
Right.
the
You
place
couldn't,
where they do the act.
yeah, you couldn't, he would have been like, well, he died anyway, but it would have been faster if it had been in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they would have fucking dragged him out of the courthouse and lynched him in the streets. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it would have been terrible. But, well, not terrible. That probably should have been a good
It
thing
would have
to
been
happen.
great, but
Yeah, it would have been awesome.
Yeah.
So, in this case, the prosecution, because usually it's so interesting because it's always the defendants that ask for change of venue because they're the ones who are trying to ensure a fair trial.
Yeah.
And here, the prosecution asked for the change of venue because they're trying to get a fair trial, and they
So
asked
funny.
it because they're like, everybody fucking loves Bernie and hates Marge, so there's no chance that this jury pool is going to convict this guy of this crime.
Oh my God,
And
that's so funny.
and so that's what they end up doing. So it's called jury nullification. It's when the jury basically says like, we know you did it, we don't care. So it happens.
Right.
Like every now and then it happens, but it's rare. But in this case, they're like, that's going to happen.
Hmm.
So Bernie was ultimately found guilty of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. And this happened in 1998. That's when he got sentenced to life in prison. It was obviously not a good experience for Bernie. He was immediately attacked by his fellow inmates because he's in there for first-degree murder. You're in there with like cartel guys. You're in there with like
Yeah.
MS-13 gang members, and you see Bernie, this chubby guy with this beard who like wants to sing in the choir and praise Jesus all day, like walking in, like, of course he's a mark. Of course you're gonna take advantage of that. So he regardless of his horrible experience at the onset of being in prison, he eventually did find his niche. He's just one of those guys who just fits into, he's like water. He fits in any container you put him in. So he became a pillar of the prison community, essentially. So he was regarded as a model prisoner. He was part of the prison choir, because of course he was. He
Hmm.
would teach health classes to inmates. And again, everybody who knew him loved him. The guards loved him. The inmates loved him. He was just a fantastic guy all around. Fast forward 13 years to 2011.
Okay.
The movie Bernie comes out, and
Mhm.
there's an Austin-based lawyer named Jody Cole who saw the movie and reached out to Richard Linklater to learn more about the case because Richard and the Skip Hollandsworth, they worked on the screenplay together,
Hmm.
and they had a ton of background information on this case. She would learn a detail about Bernie's life that we don't know for sure is true or not, but was corroborated through, like, Bernie never talked about it, but it was corroborated through journals that were found of his, which is he was sexually abused as a child by his uncle.
Oh. Boo.
So based on this, and based on some of the research that Jodi Cole ended up doing on what happens to someone when they're sexually molested in a young age, she asserted in an appeal she filed on behalf of Bernie that because of the sexual abuse and because Marge was abusive to him as well, he
Hmm.
basically went into this dissociative state, which basically just means like you're just distant, right? Like you just don't, you're not really all the way present to what's going on, and because of that, that's the cause of this murder, and you can't put all the blame on Bernie for it.
Hmm.
So the judge did buy this and did state that if I had known that, I probably would not have sentenced him to the extent that I sentenced him at the time. And a new trial was set, not to determine guilt, because he was obviously guilty, he confessed to it. It was set to determine the sentencing and to rejudge the sentencing. In the interim, the judge released Bernie on bail on the condition that he lived with Richard Linklater at his
What?
Austin home, which he
What?
did,
That
which he
makes no
did for,
sense.
yeah, they're like, you're under this guy's ward. As long as you're under this guy's ward, we'll allow you to be released, basically.
That's so weird.
It's one of those things. I mean, Richard Linklater is kind of like an Austin institution, the way like Willie Nelson is, right? It's like we trust him, so that's why you can be released to him. So he lived with Richard Linklater from 2014 till 2016. So at the resentencing hearing, which then took place in 16, Marge's son testified about how sweet and loving a mother she was, and so much of that just like smacks me of like we just aggrandize the dead. Like it's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
when someone's dead, it's like it's the whole "don't speak ill of the dead."
Yeah.
But it's like nobody felt that way. Like like you didn't feel
No,
that way. You didn't talk to your mom for 9 months in the middle of a
totally.
lawsuit. Like so again, like the entire family was estranged from her. She voluntarily removed her kids from the will, and it was clear that like there was not a cohesive thing going on between the
Right.
family.
It's not like they were gonna be friends.
No.
Yeah.
What's funny is during the trial, the county commissioner for Carthage, who knew Marge like really, really well, said Marge actually told him specifically, quote, I'll spend every dime of my money before I leave it to my family. She fucking hated her
That's
family.
so funny.
And these guys were showing up in court saying like she was a loving mother and she was this and that. It's
Well,
like,
I mean,
dude,
they want her money and they should, I don't know. It doesn't sound like there's a good reason for them not to have it, just that she was a bitch.
well then here okay, so here's the thing. In this situation, nobody gets the money. So the way
Oh.
the way it
Oh,
works,
because it went to Bernie and he's in jail.
it was yeah. So there's several things going on. One is what's called the Slayer statutes, and the other one is called as cheating to the state. So a Slayer statute says that a person who kills another person cannot become the beneficiary of the person's inheritance,
That seems fair.
which means it skips Bernie and goes to the state, which is called is cheating to the state. So like the state ends up getting that money, so none of it ends up going to the family anyways. So that's where that ended up. I'm sure the son sued the state to figure out like how he can get his hands on the money, but
Yeah, as
we
I
don't
think he
know.
should. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's fucking awful. So Marge's sister is a woman named Meryl Rhodes, and she was also at the resentencing hearing for Bernie. And she goes, quote, I was always afraid of her. I never forgot that she was my sister. I always loved her as a sister, actually, even when she did ugly things. And she did. End quote. And then her son, who's Marge's nephew, said the portrayal of her aunt by Shirley MacLaine in the movie was completely accurate and recounted all the abuse she would hurl his way. It's like, I don't know. I don't buy Rod's perception that like his mom was like a loving woman. It's like, I don't know. Smells like a duck, sounds like a duck.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I feel about this, but like ultimately Bernie didn't get much better of a sentence. He ended up receiving 99 years, but he became eligible for parole. So he's eligible for parole in about 6 years from now. So in 2029, he's gonna be eligible. At that time, he'll be 71 years old, and we'll see what happens. But
So we got like a weird 2 years out.
yeah, yeah, he got two
Weird.
years out. Yeah, but it was. You should read that article. I mean, at least read the first half of it because there's a lot of stuff that I didn't put into this that I read in there, which was the diner talk around Carthage, where you
Hmm.
have like the sheriff of the city, you have the prosecution who are like, this guy killed an 81-year-old woman, and all these people are coming up to him in the diner saying, go easy on Bernie. He's a good guy. Like, and he's just like, what is going? Like, this is I use dissociative state. Like, what is happening? Like,
Do they
why
know like what the trigger was? Like what happened?
they don't know? We don't know what the trigger was. At least I didn't read. I didn't understand what the trigger was. Presumably, it was just like abuse, just like yelling and
Yeah.
screaming and being a total B, and him just
Hmm.
losing and being like, whatever, I'm just gonna kill you. I can't take this. But what's interesting is like they asked Bernie, they were like, why didn't you just like get rid of her body? Because the prosecution did state that if they hadn't found the body, they never would have been able to charge him with anything.
Yeah.
And he was like, his quote on this is because everybody deserves a good funeral,
I
and I
know, I was
just
wondering what his mortician is, because I feel like as a mortician, you'd be really good at hiding a body, but also maybe you have like that, yeah, like just like that like loyalty to giving someone a burial the way that you've done it for so long. That's so interesting. Because yeah, you
yeah.
figure like if anyone would know how to do it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that his move was pretty good of just stuffing the body in the freezer. Like then it's not gonna rot, and who goes digging in the bottom of freezers besides Rod?
I know
Um,
it's interesting that they found her in there. I feel like for the most
yeah,
part, you'd be like, oh, I don't know.
yeah, because you got to wonder,
Well, they
like,
wanted her. Well, they wanted to like deal with it. Like if she's dead, then they can work on her inheritance. Did they know that it was going to Bernie?
I don't think they knew that. No, no, the two were estranged. They didn't have any communication, and the will, and because nobody knew she was dead, the will was never executed on, so they wouldn't have known that anything had gone anywhere. Any of the money had transitioned from one account to the other.
Right.
So it's a really interesting story. The movie's phenomenal. Like it's not a sad movie. It's fun. I really, really, really did like it.
Bill
Worth
McLean is so
Definitely worth a
funny.
watch. She's awesome, and she
Um,
plays such a mean woman.
ugh, she's so good. Like she's so freaking good in Steel Magnolias. It's like unbelievable. And that was like 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah,
Um, I know that you're a Texas person. But I also just want to say again that people should not have guns. You know, could have just like left and not killed her. Like, would he have strangled her, you think? I don't
no,
think
he's
so.
too soft. He's too soft for that.
Yeah.
There was somebody did. His sister did bring up like, why didn't you just leave? And it was something about like she just control. It was like she just controls everything because at that point she was everything to him. She was his finances. Like she
Yeah,
bought his house. Like everything was
totally.
wrapped up in her.
Which is like super manipulative and like that's something that like people who are like that they do is they like make you really dependent on them and then they abuse you. That's what an abuser does. It's like their spouse, you know?
Yeah.
Like they'll be like, you can't leave, you don't have a job. You don't have any skills, whatever. Like,
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it's actually the exact same story we keep telling ourselves over and over again, except it's reverse. It's usually older man, younger girl, richer man,
mhm.
poor girl. In this case, it's the exact opposite. Like super feminine, docile dude against like an old rich lady who's just like super alpha, like over the top.
Yeah.
And this is how it ended. But yeah, your question about the guns is interesting. I guess if he didn't have access to it, he probably would have just tried to leave her or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyways,
Like,
that's the story. And like
it's
red flag
crazy.
wise, I don't know because I don't know if I feel bad that he killed her because it feels like she deserved to die.
Well,
Like,
I feel like it's a red flag that like I don't know if those relationships ever work out well, where like someone is like depending on you to like do stuff for them and they're like paying you, but they're like, oh, we're just friends. I'm gonna like give you some money. But then like it always turns weird, that you're like, you can't take like a $200,000 interest-free loan from a friend and can remain in the same level,
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you'll always have that to hold against you in like whatever way.
yeah. So are we sad that Marge is dead?
No, of course not.
Okay, nobody gives a
Fuck her.
shit.
She'd be dead anyway.
Yeah, fuck her.
Old.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. That was probably the least gross story I've told and probably
I
the most
know.
heartwarming.
It wasn't very gross. I will watch this movie. Jack, we've been watching or they just went to see Mario Brothers and Jack Black plays Bowser.
Oh, nice. I want to see that movie too.
Yeah, it's cute.
Did you go too?
No, they went while I was gone.
Oh,
But they
okay.
keep playing the Peaches song because Bowser's like in love with Peaches and he
Oh, yeah.
plays a song about Peaches and I don't know, they love it. They keep playing it.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, so that-
So, in your case, we're drinking holy water.
yeah, just like pretend to like splash it on you and make the sign of the cross. Good.
Okay,
That's
done.
close. Close. Okay.
Oh, yeah, right. That thing.
Yes. Now we've blessed ourselves. Um, Cool. So I will, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. I thought this was going to be two parts. Now I think it's only one. And I kind of changed what I was talking about in the middle of reading it last night, but I'm just going to do it anyway. So I started researching this like a couple weeks ago because I knew that I was going to drive to LA and have some time in the car and like have some time to listen to books and stuff. So I did that. And so it's a huge story. I have a lot of thoughts, but I just wanted to talk about like a little bit of it and then like a history of something in it. But the story itself kind of takes place in the 1970s, so not super long ago, but like it's still in the past. So I'm going to do something. I'm going to lay out some facts and you tell me who we're talking about. I'm going to have you guess again.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to talk about a couple things. This couple themselves and their history. Talk about folie à deux, like two people
Yeah.
kind of leaving something weird, and the history of exorcism. Can you think of a couple? I have another
Oh
list
my
of
God,
facts.
the Warrens.
Yes, the Warrens. Good job. Good job.
I love
My
that we have
other,
the exact same diet of media. Like we
I
just
know.
like, yeah, well, on
Oh,
par.
I was gonna, my next hint was gonna be some of the best horror movies and the most handsome man in horror, Patrick Wilson.
Is that the guy who plays the man Warren?
Yeah, he plays Ed Warren.
He's
Um,
okay. He's
our friend Jay and I like swoon. We talk about it. He's so handsome to us. And he
Jay
also
Jay
played,
Godfrey swoons over Patrick, whatever his name is.
yeah, totally, Patrick Wilson. Maybe not swoon, but he loves him too. But then I also, one time, this is not anything to do with this, but Patrick Wilson also can sing. And he played Curly from Oklahoma on Broadway. And like, that's all the things. He's so handsome and I love Oklahoma. So it's very exciting. So he's the best. So yes, we're talking about Ed and Lorraine Warren. So they are demonologists, mediums, public speakers, exorcists, authors, collectors, and Marcus Parks from last
Charlatans.
podcast. Yeah, he calls them Christian superheroes. But essentially, I do not believe them. I think that they are charlatans. Exactly.
They're 100% charlatans. Their
Yes.
history is like just being complete deadbeats and then finding a niche and like yeah, they just like
Yeah,
struck gold with a niche and it's all lies. It's all fucking Amityville didn't happen. Like
of course. We'll talk about
sorry,
all that.
I'm
We'll
ruining
talk
your
about
story.
the
I'm ruining
different
your
things. I was
story.
going to do next week. So we'll talk about all the movies later. I was going to do that next week, but we'll just do it now because it just was like this has been a lot. So yes, exactly like you said. Like in Amityville, there was a horrible tragedy that we'll talk about, but they were making stuff up. And the Enfield case in England, that was all made up by the girls. So the stuff is all definitely made up. But so I'm reading this story, and here's the following things that happened to me. So I read their book, The Demonologist, and then I bought it because it's kind of fun. So I have it here, The Demonologist by Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Yeah, it
It's
looks
fun.
good.
And the guy who reads it in a Long Island accent, which is like also very fun because that's like kind of they're from Connecticut, so it's like that. So this is I'll put the picture, but that's what they look like. Not as handsome as Patrick Wilson IRL. So okay, so I'm listening to their book on the way home from when Miles and I had dinner with you, and I hit an owl. Farts. Isn't that crazy? That I
That
hit an
is
owl with my car. It's fine. I just hit its wing. But so I was like, whoa, I'm listening to this thing about demons. I just hit an owl. And then my radio a different time, went to a weird setting and it was like typing your code and it kept going 666666666 by itself. And then my Arlo keeps telling me there's a person in my backyard and there's no person back there. And then my Alexa keeps playing music for no reason. So I'm like, did I summon a demon? Probably
and then
not, but
and then
like
Miles walks in the
it's weird.
background
It's
on
Miles.
cue.
Miles.
Miles,
That's
you
not my
summoned the owl, haven't you?
say
Oh
hi.
my God.
That's my
Hi.
baby. All right, I'll be right there, okay? Okay. So anyway, all those things happened. I thought they were kind of crazy, you know? So I was like, if you look for demons, you're gonna find demons, which is exactly the point, you know?
So the owl thing is kind of freaky though. Like that's not like a weird like I mean, yes, technology glitches, but like owls have consistently been a topa of death and
Yeah.
you hitting one
I just hit
is
its wing. It
weird.
flew away, but that's so weird, right? I've never hit an owl before. So I was
Yeah,
like, ah, like in the
that's
car.
a
I
wild
screamed.
one.
Miles was like, what is happening? Also, there's a new, I wrote, am I the algorithm or is the algorithm me? Because there's a new Conjuring series on HBO coming up soon. So like, I'm just like, I don't know. Did I know that when I said we did this? I don't know, but that's coming up soon. I was also in a hotel all week this week, so I was watching The Unexplained on Netflix with William Shatner. There's a couple episodes about demons that are fun. He looks terrible. He looks like he's a dead person telling you the show. He looks super old. But there's an episode where a lady is like, I think that my house is haunted. It came with all this furniture. This chair right here, the guy died in it, and they found him a week later. I was like, throw that chair away.
Yeah, why would you want that in your
What's wrong with you?
house?
Yeah. So anyway, it's fun if you ever want to watch that. So Ed Warren was a demonologist, which is essentially like he studied demons. He says he's the only person allowed to perform exorcisms or recognized for them outside of the Catholic Church. I'll talk about more of that in a second. So their story is in the it's in is in the 1970s, 60s, but I want to talk about exorcism like as a historical thing in different religions as well. So another thing for the that's fun. Like so the book Demonologist is fun. Some stuff that Ed clarifies in the book, it's like written by them and another writer who like wrote it. You know what I mean? But it's like sometimes it's in his voice.
Yeah.
But for the record, many times exorcisms, like they're not ghosts, they are demons. So you're not talking about a ghost, you're talking about a demon. But he's saying that ghosts do exist because of things that are like, this kind of makes sense, where he's like, of course you see ghosts of Victorian women in houses because that's when like the oldest houses that we have were built. And women died in them all the fucking time, like having babies and stuff. So like of course if you bring a newborn baby into an old Victorian house, there's a really good chance that there is a woman who died in childbirth there that's going to come and try to look at your baby in the middle of the night. And I'm like, I feel like that makes sense. What do you think?
It
What do you,
tracks.
how do you feel about that? How do you feel about
I
ghosts?
so I do think that when we were working in the Biltmore that
Mm.
I saw a woman. I do remember that, and I just convinced myself that I didn't, you know?
Ooh.
But I was like, but I
That,
know I did. Yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
last place the Black Dahlia was seen alive.
The Biltmore Lobby Hotel or the Lobby
Hmm.
Bar. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I was playing in that back unfinished part of the Biltmore,
By yourself?
and I was playing pong with somebody else, and they whacked the ball past me, and I tried to like spin to get it, and as I spun, I saw a woman standing behind me in all white, and then I like finished the spin, and I turned back around, and there was nobody there.
Okay. Well, I am obviously like not religious and I'm saying there's no demons, but like I believe you. Fuck, that scares me.
But I mean, Taylor, to be fair, I also vividly remember being like 6 years old, and my mom asked me to go get something from her room,
Hmm.
and seeing Skeletor there, like Skeletor standing in her room. Like
Does
you
your
remember?
mom have a Skeletor poster? Is she like a
No, it
Skeletor
was like a
fan?
real Skeletor, and I saw it with my eyes and was like, and then I looked back and I'm like, I was probably playing with a Skeletor doll, and then just
Yeah.
imagined it, you know? So I don't.
Well, so yes, so that's the thing. So Ed Warren is like, I don't believe in like a literal flaming hell, but he does believe in like the dichotomy of good and evil and like light and dark and like one thing or the other and like that there are other things happening in like different planes. So it sounds like something that like I could maybe get on board with is the idea of like a spectral plane, time has no meaning, different dimensions, something collective unconscious, like in your head. Like there's a lot more going on in like our brains than we know, which like I think could account for some of that.
Yeah, yeah, I can buy that.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just I'm scared a little bit. Like I feel like I see ghosts at my house sometimes. They're like corner of the eye ghosts. They kind of like kind of swish past. Do you know what I mean? Like oh,
Yeah,
someone there. You're like, no, it wasn't. So but we're not talking ghosts, we're talking like actual demons, like agents of the Satan himself. Every once in a while, like Satan will show up on these stories like as like a physical thing. And so for exorcisms themselves, I'm sure that like everything else, it happened for all time because mental illness has happened for all of time. You know what I mean?
right,
So like if someone is like schizophrenic, there were schizophrenic people in the Middle Ages, and of course you're going to be like, this person is possessed by something because you don't understand. You don't
right.
even understand it right now, really, you know? So for good measure, I looked up a couple things just to, like give myself some background and like figure it out. You can go to Catholic.com and get the words for the rite of exorcism. So they actually have like all the words that you need to read to perform an exorcism. And it does say, this is the fun part. So I'm gonna read this part of the prayer. Yield, therefore, yield not to my own person, but to the minister of Christ. For it is the power of Christ that compels you, who brought you low by his cross. Tremble before that mighty arm that broke asunder the dark prison walls and led souls forth to light. So that has like power of Christ compels you, which is the funnest part. That's what he yells in The
Right.
Exorcist. So
Yeah.
that's actually in the exorcism rite, is in there. I also wanted to look up, also like, as we're talking about Catholics, I can't not bring up that since 1940, 4,392 US-based Catholic priests have been accused of molestation, which is 4% of them. So like, and also Protestants, in the past 20 years, they've identified 380 sexual abusers, and there's a headline that Southern Baptists are like due to be in a lot of trouble. Just wanted to bring that up too. We're talking about the church.
No,
As I
this
bring
is
up something
surprising.
bad. Yeah. So in other religions, in Buddhism, there's the practice of reciting or listening to the parita. So that is reciting certain verses in scriptures in order to ward off misfortune or danger. So that's kind of like an exorcism. Eastern Orthodox religions, they distinguish demonic possession from mental illness. And the way that they do that is by seeing if the person reacts negatively to holy relics. So if you're like having visions, they'll like throw holy water at you. And if you're like, ew, I'm wet, then they're like, he's maybe having like an episode. But if you're like, it burns, they're like, demon. Make sense?
Yeah, it feels like a movie, but yeah.
Yeah. Mormons sometimes do it. In Hindu traditions, people can be possessed by bahoots or preths. So the relentless and often malignant beings, kind of like ghosts, that can like possess people. So that's what Hindus believe. It's in Islam, it's in Judaism, it's in Taoism. Interesting. Sikhs do not believe in demons. They're like, no. So there's no like Sikh rite of exorcism because they're like that they don't exist. So no.
Yeah, so in that okay, so in that hypothetical, could anybody be possessed? If you're Muslim, can you be possessed by like a Catholic devil?
I don't know. I think
Because
about
then
the
if
fact that
si
you're Muslim, the demon is Muslim.
okay,
Good
because
question.
I was trying to poke holes in the possession thing by saying, well, then how many Sikhs have ever been possessed by anything? But if you don't believe it, then you probably can't be possessed by it.
Oh my God, we just watched Zoolander, and that reminds me. He goes, "How many Aboriginals do you see modeling?" Do you
Yeah.
remember that part?
Yes.
Um. So anyway, so I also wrote, "Find me on my sidecast exorcism. Dot dot dot. What? I'll be doing those episodes soon.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm into it.
So yeah,
Have
okay.
you ever heard the theory that exorcisms do work for mental illness because it's a placebo effect of like if you think you are possessed, then you think that the remedy is the exorcism and it solves the problem.
Yeah, I kind of think that that might be what the Warrens were doing. I'll talk about that, actually have that written in the notes later, but yes, exactly. Like I think maybe if you think that your house is possessed by a demon and you need to move on, if you have these two wackadoodles come into your house, sprinkle holy water everywhere, like do all these things, and they say like this house is clean and they leave, you're gonna be like, well, fuck, this house is clean. And you're gonna
Problem
feel better.
solved. Yeah.
Problem solved. Exactly. So like, I don't know, that seems nice. Like, they're by all accounts, they're nice people. They're like trying to do the right thing. So maybe that was like kind of a part of it too, that like people feel better after we do this. So we're doing it, you know?
Right. Right.
So anyway, we're talking Catholic exorcisms. In the timeline is in AD 70, the Gospel of Mark was written, and that's where he first writes that Jesus casts out evil spirits. There's some stuff in the Bible about animals and other people being possessed by demons, so it's there in the Bible. And like I said before, like this is probably something that was in like every religion before this as well. In 1526, in 1526, Martin Luther adds exorcism to the baptismal rites. So we know like Martin Luther started a lot of things, and we've talked about this before because we were talking about the Protestant Reformation. We were talking about Henry VIII. And so like Anne Boleyn died 10 years after this because that's when he got like the idea to separate from Catholicism and all of that. But in a sense, and I hadn't really thought about this, but a baptism to like a baby is an exorcism.
A
Like that's
baptism
what
to a
they're doing.
baby is an exorcism.
Yes, it's like a light baby exorcism. You pray over them, you bring the holy water, their parents are there. Afterwards, you have to change clothes. Like it's like a little tiny exorcism. You're like getting all of the badness from being born with sin out of the baby, and then it can like go and make its own mistakes. You know what I mean?
Sweet. Yeah.
So that's what it is. Catholics have been really into it for a while. Protestants are okay with it, but they don't love it. They did it as more of like a community festival, and not like tied to one person, and probably more of like performance art of like religion. And then in the Renaissance, and then when Shakespeare was around, there's an exorcism in King Lear and one in Twelfth Night. And then you get to the Puritans. And so we talked about them a little bit before in the past too. They came over to America. They're spooky. They believe in witches and they hate fun. So they kind of believe in like that being possessed, but they don't do exorcisms per se, but they do like try to kill the person who possessed the person, like we saw in like the witch trials, you know?
Yeah.
So then a bunch of bad stuff happens in America, and then Farz just dropped something. He didn't, yeah. And then, just kidding. And then we're in the 1900s. And so what happens in the 1900s is Pentecostalism becomes a big thing. People start being born again, speaking in tongues, and like doing creepy, weird stuff. Like, again. And from history.com's article I read, they said, quote, Pentecostalism's high energy worship services and the lure of the possibility of receiving supernatural gifts from the Holy Spirit caused the movement to attract new members and continue to grow throughout the first half of the 20th century. So they're like, we can like get powers from God now. You know, Jesus can like actually literally heal us and like literally do these things. So people are kind of starting to believe in like weirder things. And then in the 1960s, Catholics started to think about exorcism a little bit more, and they're like starting to like do them a little bit. And then The Exorcist, the book, comes out in 1971. So the same thing happened with when like there were exorcisms in Twelfth Night in Shakespeare that happened when The Exorcist came out, is that people started to like need them more because they saw
Yeah.
it culturally, you know?
Yeah. Makes sense.
Have, you've seen The Exorcist, obviously.
Oh my God. I've seen it so many times. I think they're remaking it actually.
Are they? I hope it's good. Have you read it?
No, no, I won't see the movie.
Have you seen Exorcist? It's Exorcist 3 with George C. Scott with that nurse. That's like the
Yeah.
scariest like scene in all movies. Oh,
Yeah,
that's so
yeah.
good. I
Yeah.
just love George C.
All of
Scott.
them. I've seen all of them. They're all fun.
So one thing, and I think a little bit about some of the Conjuring movies and like what they're titled as well. Like, it took me until reading it to realize that like it's about the man. It's not about the demon. It's not about the girl. It's about the priest. The exorcist is the priest who does the exorcism, and it's about him and like his journey. And then like 50-year-old spoiler alert, he dies. Which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
like I didn't think it was about him until I was like reading it. And I was like, oh, it's about this is his story, not the story of like Pazuzu. See, it ties into all these things. We're talking Pazuzu, we're talking the Puritans, we're talking Henry VIII, all of it.
That's right. Pazuzu was the demon that got Regan or Reagan,
Yeah,
whatever her name is.
Reagan. Yeah, yeah. So now it's like out. Like it's in like we're in the 70s, people are thinking about it a lot. And, like they're scared. My mom and my dad and my uncle went to see it in the theaters. I remember my mom was like unimpressed, and my dad and my uncle were like, "This is the scariest movie I've ever seen." So,
Yeah. My my
um,
my my mom and dad talked a lot about The Exorcist as one of their favorite movies. It was like the first time they went and saw a horror movie because they're not horror people. But
yeah,
it sounds like The Exorcist was really like a cultural phenomenon. It wasn't like a
exactly.
genre specific thing. Like everybody had to see The Exorcist.
Yeah,
So that's awesome.
yeah, super fun. So, okay, now let's talk about Ed and Lorraine Warren. So, Edward Warren Minnie was born in 1926, and Lorraine Rita Warren was born in 1927. They grew up very close to each other in Connecticut. So, they lived in a small town near each other. They got married in 1945, and their daughter Judy was born in 1946. So, like you said, they're kind of like bumbling around. Like, Ed was a bus driver for a little bit. Lorraine was like a homemaker. They're trying to figure out what they wanted to do next. And Ed was also a painter. So if we think about the Conjuring movies, Patrick Wilson is always painting. And I
Yeah.
feel like we've talked about this before, like where you want to like you need to set up some sort of like deal with your spouse or like you believe them. So like Juan and I, if I'm ever like Juan, it was raining teeth in the house. He's gonna be like, great, let's move. You know, like he's gonna like believe me and move on. But if I'm like, Juan, I had a dream about this like terrifying nun and I just drew this picture of this demon in my dream, he'll get me professional help. You know, like listen, not like, it's not normal. Like in the movie, like in several of the movies, Lorraine will like wake up and he'll be like painting this like terrifying thing. And you're like, please don't do that in the house. But
Also, just don't have a demon room. Don't have a
yes,
room where you contain all the demons because bad things are
100%.
gonna happen.
They absolutely have that. Yeah. And like I don't believe it, but also like don't do that. Don't test it. Like don't do
Because
that.
that doll's a real doll. That doll's in on Key West, I think, right? Like that's a I forgot what the name of
Um,
the doll was, but it's actually
it's
in that
Annabelle. We'll talk
house.
about Annabelle. Yeah, yeah,
Annabelle,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, yep,
Yeah, I'll
you're right.
talk about that story. But yeah, no, it's like real, real.
Yeah,
So what they decide to do is they're also kind of interested in like the occult and all of that. Lorraine has a sixth sense and doing little quote things. So she's like kind of psychic, can kind of like do things. She can like sense presences. She sees auras, all the things that Lorraine can do. And so they do a thing where they find in the paper cases of haunted houses, so people who think that their house is haunted, and they go and they stand outside their house and they paint their house. And then they go and they talk to the person about the hauntings, and then they sell the painting later to be like, this is a painting we did of a real haunted house, and we went and talked to the couple, and here's what's happening to them. So that's how they kind of like wiggled their way into people's haunted houses, and started to like think about that as a thing.
But how did they even get the idea?
They were just like, we are, he wanted to paint, and she was thinking about like all of her like being kind of psychic and sixth sense stuff, and they thought they could channel it into haunted houses.
Okay.
There might be more to that, but that's what I got from their book.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. So the Conjuring movies definitely show them being like super, super in love, and like they have like a backstory, and they were like married forever, and they were definitely married until he died. And then I also found an article in the Hollywood Reporter that there's a woman who sued the Conjuring movies because of that, because she says that she was 15 years old and she moved in with them, and she stayed with them for 40 years, and she was like Ed's second wife and like lived with them.
Yeah, I
But
can
like,
believe it. He looks like
yeah,
a man who has secrets.
yeah. So he made it a secret. But they ended up through their paintings and through like going around and talking to people in haunted houses, doing these things where they would like do mini exorcisms, and they would like, tell people there's a demon in their house, and they would like cleanse the house, and they would get the clergy involved when they needed to get the clergy involved. So they're sort of like a first step into someone who could like really help people. And like you said before, like they're really nice, they're really sweet, they like really genuinely seem like they want to help people, whether or not like they're doing like a real thing or not. They traveled all around the country. They did tons of public lectures. So they were like really out in the field all the time. You could just like call their house and they would like answer the phone and like come and help you. And they collected, like you said, tape recordings, haunted artifacts. They had that occult museum in their house. Unfortunately, it's now closed after they both passed, but it was, you know, you can see it in the movies, and it's kind of just like that. It's like a room with like a bunch of like creepy shit that they say is tied to all these cases, and then they have like a priest come bless the room, and they keep everything like in certain places. Annabelle, and I will talk about this when I talk about Annabelle, but Annabelle is a Raggedy Ann doll, which is so much scarier than anything in the whole entire world.
I thought it was a monkey.
No, Annabelle's a Raggedy Ann doll. There is a monkey. There's a monkey in Conjuring 1.
Okay, okay, all right.
No, they
Well,
mention a
I thought,
monkey in Conjuring
hold
1,
on.
but there isn't like the thing. Annabelle herself is a Raggedy Ann doll. And I don't know if you've never seen a Raggedy Ann doll, but they're fucking creepy. And have you ever seen The Omen,
Yes,
the original one? There's also a Raggedy Ann doll like in a grave in that movie in somehow. And I'm like, fuck, Raggedy Ann dolls are so scary.
that is terrifying.
Absolutely not. No, never. My mom had a really scary doll in her room, and she can't find it. It's been lost for like a couple of years. I was like, Mom, I was like, it went back to hell. Like it is out of our lives.
I have a friend who I've known since high school, and I used to go over to her parents' house every now and then to hang out. And they had this section of the house underneath the staircase where the mom had put like a wagon, and in the wagon there was a bunch of pillows. On top of the pillows, there was this porcelain doll
Making a face because I'm real mad. That was, oh,
that was so scary. Like I still remember it. I mean, I saw this thing like 23 years ago for the first time, and I
when it
still
crossed myself
remember it.
again.
Yeah, it dead eyes,
Tells
just
you.
black dead eyes, just staring at you. And I remember
Yeah.
I asked her about it like years and years and years later. I was like, "What was up with that doll?" She's like, "My mom just loved it. My mom just loved this doll, and that's why it was always in the house." It was so creepy,
We have one
so
person
weird.
one, and I was like, is this worth anything? I'll get up, and it was like, no. And I'm like, I don't want to throw it away because I'm afraid it's going to come back. But I also like don't love it.
Yeah, it will come back. That's how it
I
usually
know.
happens.
Definitely not now when I have all this like energy around me from all these demons. So just a little bit left before I talk about the movies for a second. Like, so did they really believe themselves, or like was it a Folly Audio situation where like two people believe in something that's like so over the top that they just like really, really, really believe in it? Or was it like, you know, do they believe it because the other person believes it? Do they believe it, or do they not? Do they believe it enough that like it helps people anyway? Like you were saying, like you have someone come in and say that you're fine, and like you like feel fine. One thing that they do that they did in like one of the religions that I mentioned before, I think it was the Eastern Orthodox, where they like use a lot of physical objects. So they have the physical objects in their museum. They use crosses. They use the holy water. So they're like real things against people who are, potentially possessed. And the thing in the Conjuring movies that I really liked is I felt like that was one of the first times that they portrayed that like I saw like a ghost or a demon in a movie that felt like a real physical form. And I feel like that was intentional because like in Conjuring when like there's like those arms that come out of the wardrobe and clap. And then there's like that like demon on top of the wardrobe. Like that scared the shit out of me. And I felt like because it wasn't like ethereal ghost, it was like this is an actual thing that can hurt you. And so like I think for Ed and Lorraine, like they were really helpful to people because they were like, it's not you. You have something hurting you. You have a physical thing that is hurting you, and that's what we can help you get rid of. You know,
Yeah.
that can
Yeah.
help people like move past it. It's also criticism, especially because they're like, all of our work is like really, really scientific. And then people are like, but you base it all on God, so it can't be.
So that's actually the thing that like I will be a contrarian and say I really don't love the Conjuring movies
You don't. I love them. You're going,
because it's the matter of factness of the way they discuss or present their opinions and thoughts is so cringe to me.
that's exactly what they were like. Exactly. That they definitely get right. Because they're like, God is real, demons are real, this is real,
Like they're
this is
acting like
this.
they're giving thesis statements at Harvard, and it's like you're a bunch
Exactly.
of like you're pulling stuff out of nothing. There's no science at all in this. Like,
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Exactly. And so we had there was a 1997 interview in the Connecticut Post and the New England Skeptical Society, which sounds fun. They said they found the couple to be pleasant, but their claim of demons and ghosts was, quote, at best, as tellers of meaningless ghost stories, and at worst, dangerous frauds. So like it's like a little bit of both, but yeah, you can't be like they say everything like it's fact. There really isn't like wiggle room for what the stuff that they're saying.
yeah, because assume that what they did helped people, right? But how many
Hmm.
people did it also inspire to have these thoughts of like, this is what's happening to me too?
Yeah,
They
I don't
didn't get
know.
help that help.
Yeah. And like, was it happening anyway? Like, there was that German exorcism, like Annalisa woman,
Yeah,
during that time too, and she just had epilepsy. Like, and
yeah,
there's cases of people in like Latin America and South America dying because they live in small towns where there isn't adequate medical care, so they'll call in someone to do an exorcism, and you're like, that person really needed to go get a hospital.
yeah,
Like they didn't need you to do all these things with them that ultimately like leads to their death because there's so much other stuff going on.
right.
Yeah, but they were very successful in their life. They went around the country, they toured, they wrote books. They wrote like 10 books. They Ed died in 2006 and Lorraine died in 2019. So she kept the museum alive until she died, and then it went to her daughter and her son-in-law, and now it's closed, but I don't know if, like why that happens. But yeah, they just like lived this really weird life going around helping people in like a really seriously there are demons way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to find a thing because I heard that they sold the rights. No, it wasn't them. It wasn't them. It was the Lutzes. The Lutzes
Yes.
sold the rights to their story for $300,000, which was like, man, that was a bargain.
So, okay, so let's talk about the movies. So some of the movies that they're like involved in, like one I didn't write down is like in Poltergeist, which is also fantastic. The woman is supposed to be based off of Lorraine. She's like an older woman who's like a psychic, you know what I'm talking about. But the Amityville story, so in real life, the house in Amityville, Long Island, the son of the DeFeo family killed everybody in the middle of the night. He said a demon made him do it. He probably was just, schizophrenic, having an episode, something else. He killed his whole family, and then the Lutzes bought the house. They were married. Lutz was the stepdad to the kids. It ruined the kids' lives. I watched a movie, a documentary of their son, and their son's like, my life is fucking ruined because of this. Because he's like, what I believe, like my parents were telling me there were ghosts here, but like there weren't really, but everybody knew who he was after that, and it was just like pretty awful how that happened to him.
So is it widely now accepted that nothing in that movie was or the story was accurate?
I think so. I mean, I've heard that people like, overheard that like the Lutzes and the Warrens laughing about how much money they were gonna make, you know? So it's like one of the things, and nothing's happened in that house since. Like no one who's lived
Yeah.
there since, but it has like a ton of movies that are great. I watched one about this like haunted lamp that like Patty Duke was in it. It was like really good. It was like Amityville. There's an Amityville Dollhouse movie that I watched from the 70s that was like kind of a made for TV movie, but like they're great and it's super fun and really scary. When like Lutz falls into that closet full of blood. Do you remember that part?
Is that the original? Because I don't remember that from
I
the
think so.
remake.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's real
no, no.
scary.
I thought that so by contrast to Conjuring movies, I love the Amityville movies. Like I
Yeah.
thought those were fantastic because it didn't go into this whole science aspect of like possession and stuff. It was just a fun, scary movie. I still think it's scary. That whole
Mhm.
scene of Ketchum, the guy who would torture Native Americans and bury them in that crawl space. Like,
Hmm.
remember that from the remake?
No.
Yeah, there was yeah, Ryan Reynolds found a room in the basement that led to this torture chamber underneath the house. Is where
Uh-huh.
this guy, this European guy, would torture Native Americans. It was just
Whoa.
fantastic. And also, by the way, it's worth noting that I don't totally buy that Ron DeFeo did that on his own because everybody was found on their stomachs. He shot
Right.
them with like a 45. He shot them with like the loudest gun possible.
And they were saying like maybe his sister helped him and then he kills her. Did you hear that theory?
Yeah, yeah.
Like someone else was
Well,
there. Do you still?
yeah.
Yeah.
I heard that like they were like romantically involved.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I also heard that like his dad was like actually a legitimate mobster, and maybe like there was something going on with
Mm.
that. But I don't know. I don't know. The story itself is really creepy. I will say that Taylor, knowing me as well as she knows me, when I got my house in Austin, she sent me a housewarming gift, and it's the sign that hangs outside of the Lutz's house on the night that Ron killed his entire family, and it just says "High Hopes" on it. And I put
Right.
it up in my house, and people come over and they're like, why is this like 38-year-old man like have decorations that like a 70-year-old woman in Carthage would have? You know, it's like no. This is cool. It's not weird. It's not like a live,
It's like
laugh, love thing. It's
exactly.
like
It's not a live, laugh, love.
it's a murder
It's high
thing.
hopes.
It's way cooler.
It is
So
really cool.
thank
I
you.
got it on Etsy. Yeah, and like I did also like in one of the documentaries with like the kid that grew up and was really like haunted, like literally haunted by the whole thing. They were like, yeah, there was a red room in the basement because we just like had red paints. We painted like a room red, and you're like, okay, well, people are gonna be mad about that. That's Amityville. The house goes up for sale every couple of years, but like no one's been seen anything there since. For
The
the
house is still
Annabelle,
creepy. Would you sleep in that house? I wouldn't. I would not sleep in that house. Five
I
people were shot to death. Every
I know, I
room,
don't know.
there's a body in every room in that house. Like
I
that's
feel like I would
creepy.
definitely not sleep in like the attic rooms that have like the eye windows. Like that's a hard no for me.
Yeah, yeah,
But I'd
agreed.
go there, but I'd be scared. I'd be scared. I
Yeah.
don't know. So the Annabelle story is about a doll, that Raggedy Ann doll, and in the beginning of the Conjuring movie, they do the Annabelle story the way that like it really happened, which is these two nursing students got this doll, and they were like, then it started like weird stuff started to happen, like it was always moving around the house,
Yeah.
and it started to like leave little notes on paper that they didn't have with a pen they didn't have that was like miss me, I'm like right on the wall, which is so scary. And then they tried to throw her away, and she came back, and all these things, and they were like, a little girl named Annabelle died here, and we like let her into the doll, but it wasn't a doll, it wasn't a ghost, it was actually a demon, and like it scratched the boyfriend and all this like super fun stuff. There's a lot of Annabelle movies that go back to like Annabelle creation, and like they're fun, but that's not like the real story of Annabelle,
Right. Right.
right? So The Conjuring, the first one that I really like, in that story, the family had actually been in the house for like 13 years before they started having problems. And another thing where I didn't think about the title, just like in The Exorcist, like they don't really talk about in the Conjuring movie, they're like, oh, a woman who was like related to the ghosts, and oh no, maybe this is a different one. But like a woman killed her child here and like started to like make everybody kill their children, and like that's what had happened. But like in real life, one of the daughters tried to summon a demon, and that's what a conjuring is. So like they didn't
Uh,
even like, I don't know, like I took that word for granted, but like they a conjuring is like conjuring a demon. So the girl was like into it, so her parents bought her a book. And one of the things that Ed and Lorraine are like is like there's always books on the occult, so you gotta be careful because if you read one and you do it the wrong way, you're gonna let something like really scary into your house. So that's what
yeah.
happened in that story. And in that story in the book, the Warren's book, and what they say like really happened was that when it was over, they left and they were like, just so you know, this isn't like totally gone, but it's like mostly gone. And they were like, what do you mean? And then something took, this is what they say. So they took Lorraine's glasses off of her face and threw them on the ground. And they were like, just don't piss it off again. And they
Jeez.
left. which is hilarious. I know there's a Nun movie too as well with them, because he did have those like nun dreams and he was a painter, but there's like more to that story that I don't know a ton about. But the last one, okay, Conjuring 2 is about the Enfield poltergeist in England,
Yeah.
and they were like barely there. They were like there for a day. They weren't really involved in that story at all. The other people from like the society in England that went and stayed and really researched it were there for like almost 2 years. They like, lived with this family for almost 2 years. But it's like it was obviously the kids. It was just the girls,
Messing
fucking
about.
with everyone. Yeah. And then Conjuring 3 makes no fucking sense. I've seen it like 3 times and I have no idea what's going on. Like there is a story where the Warrens went to help with someone who had said that he was possessed by a demon when he killed his landlord. But
Is that the
I
devil
mean,
made me do it?
yeah.
Okay.
So like that case is real, but there's also this like whole part where I get super lost where like they find a cave and there's like this like really tall woman who's like the daughter of this old man and she does a thing and like just I still don't know what happened and I've seen it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I never, that's one I didn't watch. Again, like, I just fell out of love with the Conjuring movies. I was just like, eh. Also, I also find that woman who's the one who becomes possessed really fucking annoying. And I don't like watching her. You know what I'm
Rebecca
talking
Ta
about?
Rebecca Taylor in The Conjuring 1.
Yeah, I think that's probably her name.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. Yeah, that one I really like because it has some of the things that are like so scary to me that like the having your sheets ripped off of you in the middle of the night, like stuff like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
You're like, oh my God, I would like lose my mind if that was something that had happened to me. So because it's like the real tangible stuff that they show in that movie that I felt was like new as far as like ghost stories and like hauntings went. Because it wasn't like there's a murder in my house. It was like there's this like physical being in my house that's haunting me, and like
Yeah.
I think that's super scary and like super. I think that they're fun. I will definitely watch the Conjuring TV show, but I still think maybe like the real Ed and Lorraine Warren aren't what I want to continue to learn about, but I still want to watch. Oh, I don't know if Marjorie and Patrick Wilson are in it, but I still want to watch them together. I
Yeah.
still want to
I
like
get
watch
it.
Patrick Wilson and like Insidious and all the movies that he's in because he's so handsome.
Insidious. That was a good
Mhm.
one. Man,
Yeah,
there was a time period there when like all those movies hit at once.
and they're so
With
good.
Sinister, do you remember Sinister?
Sinister, there's like an article and it's like what are the scariest movies of all time, and Sinister is number one, just because like the couple things that happen, people's heart rates like went out of control, like just
It,
like out of
that was
control. So
me. That
scary.
was me. I that was one of the few movies I watched where I regretted watching it afterwards. It
Yeah.
was that and Babadook and Lights
Mm.
Out. Those were the three movies where after I watched them, like, I really don't want this to live in my head anymore.
What's Lights Out?
So that's the one where there's this ghost
Ugh,
who,
Jesus fucking Christ.
yeah, yeah, it's this spirit that only shows up when the lights are turned off.
Oh
So
God.
imagine you watch that movie and then it's bedtime. You're like,
This is okay. I don't even want to have this screenshot up on my computer ever again. No, that's real scary.
yeah,
Ugh. Bleh.
yeah,
Well, yeah, that's it. Exorcism, isn't real because demons aren't real, but it's interesting that like every culture has it and that people still do it. And there's times when you're like, oh, there's been more during this time or less during this time in history. And I think that's because of like what's going on in the world. Like, have we heard about exorcisms recently? Is it like being written down in popular culture? So like you might think you have to have it. Are you like unable or unwilling to understand pieces of mental illness? You know, like
yeah,
is that something or like physical illness where you're like, why is this person acting this way? Because like also we've talked about like lobotomies and like one little jiggle in your brain and you're a different person, you know?
yeah,
So
yeah,
like one little like weird thing happening in your head, like you could potentially completely change. And that can be really scary for people around you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was thinking about the Michael Taylor possession case where he turned into a demon, but it was because they like believed it. Like,
Exactly.
like he ripped his wife's tongue out and then clawed her eyes out and killed her. Like he acted like that, but it was because it was like, no, 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 dude, you have a demon in you. Like
Yeah.
you're actually possessed. And it's like, well, if you tell someone enough shit, it's gonna
Hmm.
soak into their psyche eventually.
Yeah, like yeah, exactly. Like what does your brain what does your brain create? So we're like, I don't know, I feel like my takeaway from that is be careful about, things that seem super crazy, but also like do what makes you feel good. Like if you can fix yourself with a placebo, I guess you don't know that, but if you do, you could. Like I feel like that's okay. I'm a no on demons, but I'm a yes on probably on ghosts. But I don't
So,
know what it means.
okay, so you say that, Taylor, you say that, but here's where like the rubber meets the road. If I found a book and I found all the little accoutrements that I would need to summon a demon, but I was like, Taylor, I want to do this, but I'll only do it with you, and I'll only do it at your house. Would you let me do it?
No, I don't think so.
There you go. Okay. Because I wouldn't either. Because as much as I mock religion and spirituality, I still don't want that in my life.
Totally. Well, there's like I think also in Enfield, I forgot there was a Ouija board as well. So I'm like, I don't want to do that either.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, okay,
That's
so
really
we
funny.
we don't believe, but we don't want to test either.
Yeah, I'm not gonna like rock the boat. I'm gonna
Yeah.
sage to my room after this and we'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Creepy.
Creepy. Yeah,
Is there
but
red
they're fun.
flags though?
I mean, I think it's like the two of them were just like so. I guess there's also maybe there's a red flag of like working with your spouse and like spending so much time together that you like start to really validate each other. Like with anybody, like if you're
Yeah.
with someone and you're just yesing each other forever, like things can
Yeah.
get weird.
Yeah. But good for them. They found their niche,
Yeah.
They probably them alone and their work probably added like multiples of billions of dollars in movies and books
Oh
and
yeah, there's like
economic
numbers.
activity and
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
so which
And they're
ones
still
which ones
going.
do we attribute? So we attribute Amityville, Insidious,
Yeah.
The Conjuring 1, 2, 3, which to your point, that one's called The Devil Made Me Do It, which is an actual case where they legitimately tried to prove that the devil exists
Mm-hmm.
legally, which is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
The Enfield Poltergeist,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Poltergeist itself, right?
Mm-hmm. Annabelle, like all of
Annabelle,
those. There was a like a
The
1990s
Nun.
some The Nun.
Yep.
There was a TV movie in the 90s called The Haunted. I've never seen that. Oh, The Haunting in Connecticut as well
Okay.
as them. Um, yeah, that's what I have. I have Definitely Do It, Annabelle, Amityville, Conjuring, The Haunting in Connecticut. There was a also that made for TV movie The Haunted that I've never seen that I want to. There was something they did at West Point that was fun that could definitely be a movie. I mean, I think you could keep going.
Yeah, because I mean, every one of those little trinkets that they stored in that room, which was a ton of stuff, would probably spin off into its own movie.
Yeah, why not? They always like zoom into that room in like the end of the movies and it's like, oh, that's where you take the dancing monkey doll, and that's where you see like
Yeah.
another like little thing that makes noise or like, a clock and like a necklace, and you're like, oh my God.
The Nun freaked me out. The Nun was one that actually did freak me out.
I did a visual when we were watching The Nun in our scary movie club, but I think the nun looks like Prince William, and that lightens it for me.
Well, you kind of ruined it for me then.
I have the screenshot. I'll send it to you because I have pictures of them side by side, and I'm like, that's exactly the same.
Same, same.
But it is scary. Nuns are scary. But like also, okay, oh my God, I know we need to go. But like, you know how you're like, of course there's Victorian ghosts in an old Victorian house because women died there. But I feel like of course there's nuns haunting places because like, where are they gonna go?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
their family abandoned them,
hmm
and they're celibate, and they have nobody.
hmm Oh, wait, I have one more thing. There was a story in the book, I'm so sorry, where he's like, there was a ghost of a mom who died in a car accident and she had like six kids and she was haunting the house because she didn't know she was dead. And so they did an exorcism to like get rid of, have her go, like move on to the next level. And Ed Warren was like, that might seem kind of cruel because she could live in this house with her family, like as a ghost. But what happens when the family dies? And what happens like the next generation? In 200 years, she's gonna like, what, haunt this house forever? And I was like, that's kind of cool
Yeah, that's a good point.
as a thought.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm
Well,
done.
good for them.
I,
We need to go back down a horror rabbit hole. So one thing to note for people who are listening is that every October, Taylor, our friend Jay, myself, and a whole host of other folks do this thing we call Calendar of Horror, where Jay, for the most part, organizes
Mostly Jay.
this intricate spreadsheet of movies, horror movies, where you can watch them or rent them or whatever. And every night we have a shared Slack channel that we discuss. We watch the movie and discuss it. Ever since I moved
It's
to
the
Texas, it's
best.
been harder for me, and I don't know how we're going to do it this year now that Jay's on East Coast time and you're on
It's almost
Pacific, I'm on
impossible.
Central. It's almost
Yeah.
impossible now,
Mhm.
but we'll do what we can. But I mean, it probably won't be like an every night thing like it had been. Maybe it'll be like a once a week thing. But
Yeah, I can't do it until like late anyway because I have the kids, all the things, but figured out. But it's so fun, and we watched so many scary movies, and it's the best. We
yeah,
watched Deep Blue Sea last night. Me and Juan. That's not a horror movie, but it's real fun.
it's fun. I like it.
Awesome. Thanks, Faris. That was fun.
Thank you, Taylor. I kind of want to see a horror movie now. So thankful for the Warrens for that. You know what? They touched my life. They actually touched my
Yeah.
life because my fascination with horror movies all can be rooted back to movies like Amityville.
I mean,
So
yeah. Remember
awesome.
seeing that when you were little and you're like, oh, so
It's still
fun.
scary. It's still scary. Like again,
Yeah.
I probably won't ever watch Sinister again because that movie really, really
I actually
did.
I think that's totally fair. Like that's one that you don't need to watch again. Because I
Yeah.
can like think of it right now and think of like all the terrible things and be like, oh my God. Yeah.
Do you know the lawnmower scene?
I know. That's what I was thinking about. Oh, or the deck chairs that get pulled into the pool. Oh my God.
They made a part two, and the part two is actually still pretty good. It's nothing
I think I
compared to the
saw it.
first one,
Yeah. Is
but
that Ethan Hawke?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, follow
Well,
us
thank
for
you,
more horror movie recommendations.
and all the things on social, like, subscribe, give us 5 stars, give us feedback, commentary, all that good stuff.
Thank you. Tell your friends,
Tell
and
your friends.
we'll do it again next week.
We'll do it
Thanks,
again next week. Thank you, Taylor.
Thanks, Farz.